tell me about Nabil converting. Like, what was the final straw? I know he's got a book before he passed. I forget the name of it, but
Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of gone through all the arguments and reasons and so on.
Yep.
And I tend to ask people, like, why do you believe that this is true? What are your reasons? Because that tells me what I need to study to see if those are good reasons or not. And at that first weekend when we're having these discussions, it's because Islam is proven by history and by mathematics and by prophecy and by this and reason and logic and everything supported Islam, according to him. And so we eventually start going through that stuff. And this was probably a year before he converted when we had started talking about Islamic topics. And he found out there's all this stuff that he'd never heard about before in his sources. Because I'm going through his sources and I'm going, hey, you told me to read this source because this is going to show this. Well, look what I actually found. And I asked him again about a year because I noticed he'd changed and he wasn't, the scientific miracles. He wasn't saying all this stuff anymore. And so I asked him about a year before he converted and I go, hey, so why do you believe that Islam is true? Why are you still a Muslim? And he said 2 reasons. He said, 1, it makes sense to me. And 2, the people I feel the presence of God on most strongly are my grandparents, and they're Muslims. And on the one hand, that's interesting because it went from all this proof that Islam is true to something else. But that was actually terrifying, if anything can be like, oh no, what do I do here? Because if you say science proves that Islam is true, that's something we can open the books. You can show me what you're quoting that you think is some sort of miraculous scientific knowledge in the Quran or the Hadith, and we can investigate that. And I was a biology and philosophy major. He was communications major and pre-med and stuff like that. Smart guy. He knew his stuff. We could actually look through stuff seriously and know what we're talking about. So everything he said when we first met, that was all stuff we could investigate. If you say Islam makes sense to me and I feel the presence of God on my grandparents,
you can't argue with that.
What am I going to say? No, you don't. Yeah. No, you don't feel the presence of God on your grandma. Like, how do you argue with that?
I've met her. She's awful. I don't know what she'd say.
Yeah, it's like, but it went from the realm of the falsifiable to the realm of the unfalsifiable.
Yeah.
There's no evidence. I'm thinking there's no evidence I can give you to convince you that you don't feel the presence of God on your grandma. So like, what do I even do at this point? And so after that was like, what do I do now? In apologetics or polemics, or what do I do against someone who's become unfalsifiable? But I realized, wait a minute, if you're taking that as evidence, you still might be given stronger evidence that outweighs that evidence. If you're taking this as some kind of evidence, then we can still have evidence that outweighs that and makes you think, okay, maybe my feeling about my grandma isn't the deciding factor in all of this. So we kept at it. And after a while, he got to the point where he's just, Islam makes sense to me, but these guys have evidence for everything they believe. He didn't tell me this until after he became a Christian, but he said when we would go through the historical reliability of the New Testament, or when we would go through why Christians believe Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, he told me later, he said, every time we went through this stuff, I would be thinking to myself, wow, I thought these guys had nothing, but they have really good reasons for what they believe. And so that started bothering him. And so he told me, again, later on after he converted, what would happen in his mind is, well, these guys actually have good reasons for everything they believe. But even if they show me with 99% certainty that all these things are true, I'm still 100% certain that Islam is true because of the scientific miracles and because of the perfect preservation of the Quran and because of the amazing character of Muhammad. Hence the importance of us going through all those issues eventually. And so then he started saying that he has doubts about all these things. And then he went into this different mode where it was, we're all human beings, we have biases, we're raised to think certain things, and we only know a tiny fraction of what can be known. So I can't tell what's true. I don't think God is going to hold me accountable if I get this wrong. So I'm just going to remain a Muslim. And so that was another like, oh no, what do I do here? Fortunately, he continued wanting to pursue, but he prayed to God one night. He was on a trip with his dad. He was in a hotel room, and he prayed, and he said, God, I know I'm biased here. I see good reasons to believe in Christianity, but Islam still makes sense to me. I don't know what to do here. So you're going to have to tell me. He said, so can you give me a vision to tell me what to do? and whatever vision you give me, I'll follow it. And he said the room he was in faded to black, and all he saw were crosses.
Oh my!
And then he said he prayed. Well, that may be it, but how do I know my mind's just not playing tricks on me? He said, so can you give me a dream?
Hallow is the #1 Catholic prayer and meditation app to deepen your spiritual life anytime, anywhere. Go to hallow.com/MattFrad to get the first 3 months for free.
And then he had this weird dream where he's up on a mountain, and he's up on this mountain with everyone, all his family and stuff. They're all on this mountain. All of a sudden, he zooms out to a different view from a different mountain. And he's looking. It's not a mountain. It's on this giant, like, reptilian thing. And he goes, "Whoa, we're all on this giant reptilian thing." And this giant reptile turns, and he said this giant boy walks up and says, "I know what you are," talking to the reptile, and says, "I know what you are. I challenge you to a fight." And he says the boy smushes the reptile. And then the reptile's enraged. The reptile turns to him, and it goes to attack him. And then he says, but the boy has a cricket with a sword, and the cricket with a sword pops out and chops the reptile's head off, right? And so he tells me this, and he tells multiple people this, and they're like, so it sounds like the reptile thing is something you are already part of, and then you see it from a different angle, and you realize it's bad. And then there's a boy, which he interpreted as me. I challenge you to a fight. Yeah, okay. He interprets the boy as me, and he interprets the cricket as Christ with a sword to chop its head off right before it destroys him. And so he told this to everyone, even his family. They said, "Oh, you have to break out our books on dream interpretation." And he looks it up, and it's like the reptilian iguana thing, that's an enemy. And a boy is a friend, and a cricket is a protector, and all this stuff. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute, this all fits exactly what I thought. But then he thought to himself, well, there's a lot of symbolism and so on. I'm not going to base my conversion, possibly my eternal destiny, on something that I'm interpreting. So he prayed, he said, "God, can you give me a dream I don't have to interpret?" And so after
the crosses weren't enough.
Yeah.
So let's keep going.
So after that, he had another dream, and he calls me up one day. He said, "Hey, are there dreams in Christianity?" And I go, "Well, I mean, in the Bible, people had dreams telling them what to do and stuff." Yeah. So you got Joseph there, and then Joseph in the Old Testament, Joseph in the New Testament. Yeah, you had people getting dreams in the Bible, getting warned by dreams and stuff. And he goes, "Okay, how do you interpret this?" He said, "I'm standing outside this narrow doorway, and I look in, and you're inside there, and you're at this big feast. And you're all looking, you're waiting for someone to show up to the feast. And I can't get in. The door's just narrow enough for me to get in, but I'm outside." And he says, and I look in, and I call out, and I say, "David, I thought we were supposed to eat together." And he said, "You didn't even look over at me. You just go, you never responded." And he goes, "So any idea what that could mean?" And I go, "Open your Bible to Luke." And he said, this is a Bible I'd given him. It's like a, I don't know, NIV study Bible or something like that. This was some study Bible. But he said he opened it up to the passage, and the heading was "the narrow door," right? Oh. And he looked, and that's where, you will be outside the feast, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and you'll see the feast of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and stuff. And it was funny, because when he asked me about it, when he said, "Hey, how do you interpret this?" He said, the first thing I said was, I don't need to interpret it. It's straight out of the Bible. You just dreamed yourself right into a parable of the Bible. And it was that, I don't need to interpret it. It's like, wait, I prayed this for something that I wouldn't need to interpret. Wow. And he still didn't become a Christian after that. He said, "Okay, two dreams is good. Could I have a third one?" And his third dream was, he's in a mosque. He's waiting for the leader of his sect to arrive in the mosque. And he's sitting on some steps inside the mosque. There's a stairway. He's sitting on the steps. Anyway, the leader of his sect shows up and sits down on the floor in front of him. And you can't be seated higher than the leader. So he said, "I tried to get down off the steps, but I was blocked. I can't get off the steps." And so he said, "I have to go around." And he said, I turned and looked, and the steps were leading up out of the mosque. And so the only way out of this was to leave the mosque and so on. And even then, it was months. It was months after that of discussions and so on before it's kind of funny the way he told me he became a Christian. We ended up going to a Chinese restaurant. It was me and probably 5 or 6 Christian friends and Nabil, and we get our plates, and then we say, all right, who's going to pray? And Nabil goes, I'll pray. And everyone's like, oh boy. I'm like, okay, let's see what this is like. And he goes, Lord, bless this food. And he says a little prayer, and he goes, and I pray this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I just thought, wow, everyone at the table got it instantly, but I've been arguing with him for so long, it didn't hit me. I was like, gosh, he's hanging out with us so much. Now he even prays like a Christian. He's hanging out with us so long, he even prays like a Christian now, when that was him telling us that he had become a Christian.
Wow. Thank you very much for watching that Pints with Aquinas clip. If you like it, do me a favor, click like and subscribe, and please offer a Hail Mary for the work of Pints with Aquinas and all the people we're trying to reach. God bless you.